You're listening to the Sanditon Chronicles, where we talk all things Sanditon and Sanditon adjacent. Come along with us as we dissect all of your favorite characters, scenes, and dialogue. We have so much to tell you. Hi guys, welcome back to the Sanditon Chronicles. I'm Maureen.
And I'm Janice. Good to see you.
And today we are back with another episode. We have gone over all the character developments that, if we've forgotten one, let us know. Well, we've gone over the big ones, and we've gone over some of the new side characters that are in there that we're hoping to see come back. So let us know if we forgot one. But today we are digging into the ironies and parallels of Sanditon 2 as a standalone, and also Sanditon 2 compared to Sanditon 1. So we're going to dive right in it. Janet, this is Janice's baby right here. This is she requested to do this last season. So we brought it back because we know that she likes it, and it's interesting to find these things.
Yeah,
these
to
layers.
think about it. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
It is. Yeah, and I don't think. I mean, they're different this year, and as you and I have talked about, a lot of it is because it's a more complex story with all the different characters. Before it was basically the Parkers et al. And the Denhams, and it wasn't. And Georgiana was part of the Parkers. And this season we have that plus the Parkers aren't maybe quite as big a deal because you don't have Sydney and his guys.
Yeah.
But you do have the military and these two rivals for Charlotte's attention. I mean, not Charlotte, but Allison's attention. And then you also have Colburn and his family and the colonel who are vying for Charlotte's attention. And then you have what's happened to Sydney and what's going on with Georgiana and the artist and the complications of what's going on with the Denhams. So it's a more complex story.
It was more ensemble this year than it felt last year. Last year was more like it was more just certain people, and this year it's everyone is involved.
Right. Yeah, more, and I think last year's maybe the stories of the characters we saw were more in depth. Whereas there's so many characters they can't do, and they only did 6 episodes.
Yeah,
this time. So, yeah, it's big differences.
I hope that this was just because it was building season 2. It was building up these new characters, and season 3 we're going to go more in depth on the characters that remain.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And as we know, we're going to get some returns and some returns from the first season too that weren't here for the second season. So
yeah,
it'll be fun. And did you see the post that PBS put out with some pictures of
the
new season? Yeah.
Did not like the way Charlotte was looking at Ralph. I did not appreciate that.
Because she looked like she actually liked him, huh?
Yes.
Or was interested in what he was saying.
I was not okay with that.
Well, they're just sucking us in so that then they'll tell us how all this comes about.
There was one person on Twitter, and if I can find the tweet, I will give you credit on here. So if you're watching this and it was you, let me know. But she shared the post from Masterpiece, and she said something along the lines of, "Am I crazy? Am I becoming a Ralph fan?" No, don't become a Ralph fan. Not only will that lead to heartbreak. Well, now I don't know. See, now I'm conflicted.
You hope. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I still just don't understand how they're going to move away from that situation. Yeah. So
what if they don't? I mean, they don't have to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we don't know that for sure, but I think since it's called Sanditon, and not Willingdon, we'll see.
But it would be funny because then you would have been right all along to keep your distance from Colburn, and everyone else would have been the ones who have been wrong. Janice can be the lone one saying, "I told you."
Well, I ultimately think he's going to come around, but it's in the meantime, he's got to earn my respect.
That's right. All right, so let's dig into some ironies and parallels. Janice has a list, and I can't fit a list on my tiny little desk here, so I'm trying to go off of what I remember writing down, which is going to be an interesting spectacle to watch.
I'm sure as I talk about some of these, it will prompt you. So I was really looking at the sort of both contrast and parallel, the parallel between the joy of the dance in Willington, when we first, you know, at
Mm-hmm.
the very first episode, one of the opening scenes, and that is interrupted by the news of Sydney's death, when we see Sydney's death in the background, and then we see Mary telling
Charlotte.
Charlotte, thank you, about it, and then how it parallels the joy of the midsummer ball in season 1, episode 8, that is interrupted by the news of the fire.
Mm-hmm.
Both are heartbreaking.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
you know,
And the dance at Willington, it seemed there was more, the joy there was a different sort of joy than that Sanditon, because the one in Sanditon in that episode 8, season 1, it was more of this, not anxiety is not the word I'm looking for. Anticipation is the word I'm looking for. It was, her joy was by anticipation of knowing, but not knowing what's coming next, and having this finality, but no finality. But then the season 1 opener or season 2 opener, we see it's just freedom. It's joy and just being free. And so, but I think she also kind of felt that there was a freeness coming in episode 8 of season 1, because she was about to be asked by Sydney or be with Sydney. So it was different sorts of joy there too.
Yeah, that's right. And how just, I mean, the irony within each situation, you know, between the midsummer ball and then the fire and the joy of the dance of Willington and the news of the death, those ironies and yet parallels. So actually amazing writing and storytelling. So, and another irony that hit me was that Charlotte loses Sydney in the first season, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in the second season, Sydney loses his life.
Yeah.
And also, as a result of that, Eliza loses Sydney as well. She won him at the end of season 1, and then loses him in the first episode of season 2. So those parallels. And you know, you think, oh, Eliza's won. Well, it turns out nobody's won.
Yeah.
As far as Sydney's concerned, other than we find out later on that Georgiana won because of Sydney's sacrifice.
So, and even that was a win that was parried with pain at the same time.
Right. And so Sydney, one of the reasons I'm happy with what they did with Sydney's character is that he was really honored, and we talked about this a little bit before. His memory is very much honored because he makes a sacrifice for Sanditon, then he makes a sacrifice for Georgiana. You know, and so he's pretty amazing in that way.
I like that he was brought in as sort of this guy, and Mary was the only one who really understood who Sydney was, obviously, but Sydney was brought in to appear as this guy who was aloof and arrogant and egotistical and all these things. But everything he was doing was for his family. Even when he came back to Sanditon, even when he brought Georgiana to Sanditon, when he brought his Crow and Babington to Sanditon, that was for Tom. That was for the purpose of helping him do better. So there's this underlying thing in these characters, especially the main characters. And you can see that paralleled with Colburn and Sydney, that there is something underlying that's good. And that's why we're intrinsically drawn to them without even seeing it, because we know that there's another layer that's good there. But on the appearance on the top, they both had this fear of being hurt, of being broken, or of breaking someone else. And that was the difference between Colburn and Sydney, is Colburn's fear was breaking someone else. Sydney's was being broken.
Right.
But they both had that underlying thing of, I'm caring for other people more than I'm caring for myself.
And there's a big sort of irony in season 2, was that Colburn is, as you described him, he was very self-effacing. He felt like he was going to hurt someone and was hurting himself. And you find out he's a good guy as the series goes along. And then in contrast to Colonel Lennox, who appears to be a really good guy when Charlotte meets him, and he says all these wonderful things to her unlike Sydney, who did
Mm-hmm.
not say wonderful things to her in the beginning, and then he turns out to be a, you know, really rude and treats her very poorly at the ball. And although he figures out that she's in love with Coburn, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he's not an entirely bad guy, as we talked about,
No.
but in contrast to what happened with how Sydney and Colburn are both sort of introduced to us, especially Sydney. The
Mm-hmm.
contrast between Sydney and Lennox is
Yeah.
quite different.
And I think with Lennox
So,
too, it was where Colburn and Sydney gave the appearance of egotistical, of cruel, with that underlying selfless aspect. Colonel Lennox gave
uh-huh.
off the upfront visual of, I care for all of my men more than myself. And there's probably some truth to that. But I am
Mm-hmm.
all about other people. I'm all about helping other people, doing for other people. But at his core, it's more about himself. It's, I get what I want when I want it and how I want it. And that's really who he was. So it was just, that was a nice comparison to watch while the season played out in season 2. Was Colburn and Lennox are opposite in that.
Mm-hmm.
They
You're
give the
right.
appearance that's not accurate, but what's accurate is the opposite of what they give the appearance of, and they're opposite from each other. So that was a fun thing to watch Charlotte unravel.
Right. Yeah. No, that's right. So another ironic thing I found is that Georgiana was willing at the beginning to turn down with this is within season 2. She was willing to turn down a proposal, but was had no qualms about taking the man's carriage and wrecking it. You know, it's like, okay. And so at that point we don't realize that she's really matured, because it doesn't seem like it at that point. You know, she's very rude to him, and yet uses his carriage and ends up wrecking it. So, you know, doesn't bode well for Georgiana at that point. Fortunately, it gets better, but we're still like, there's Georgiana again. Although she definitely felt more self-assured, more I can do what I want, and less of a victim. So, and then the parallel between how Miss Griffins cannot keep track of Georgiana, and neither could Miss Bernice. Is it Bernice?
Beatrice.
Beatrice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The contrast between Miss Griffins, or the parallel, couldn't keep track of Georgiana, and neither could Miss
Mrs. Griffiths.
Miss Griffiths. Yeah, I Miss Hankins. You know, the two of
Oh,
them.
Beatrice is Hankins.
Yes, Beatrice is Hankins. Do we know what Miss Griffin's first name is? I
Mm,
don't think so.
I didn't think we knew Beatrice's either until I looked it up, and I was like, oh yeah, we were told that explicitly.
Yeah, funny how that is.
No, it's just Mrs. Griffiths. And it's
Yeah,
Mrs. too. So she had to
yeah,
have been a
Mrs.
widow.
Yeah, I think she must have been. Um, and she was surviving by having this
Mm-hmm.
school for young ladies, as it
Which was
were.
why she wasn't seen as a spinster, because she had been
Right,
married before.
right. That's right. There's no backstory that's given us on that at all.
Ooh, I kind of want that now.
Uh, well, but the trouble, if you want a backstory, then you want to know what happened to her. Where is she? We
Yep.
talked about that a little bit,
We
though.
talked about where she is now, and now I want to go
Yeah.
back and figure out the rest of it. Thanks a lot, Janice. You just gave me more homework to do.
Oh, well. And then in season 1, how Charlotte runs to the aid of old Stringer, you know, when he
Mm-hmm.
falls. And in season 2, Charlotte runs to the aid of Leo at the parade. So we
Mm-hmm.
see that repeated,
Yeah.
that
Mm-hmm.
sort of rescue.
Without thought.
Without thought of your own safety.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, she just saw pain, she saw trouble, and she went. There was no
Right.
hesitation, there was no should I, shouldn't I. It was okay, I'm going. That's it.
Of
And
course, the
how sure
difference
she
is,
was.
yeah. And the difference is that in season 1, yes, Stringer comes to his father's aid, but so does Sydney. And in season 2, it's really just Charlotte coming to the aid of Leo. Then I was thinking about this, here another sort of parallel in a
Well, hey, I want
contrasted
to say
way.
something about the stringer thing real quick, because
Okay,
the other thing
okay.
that we see there too is that when Theo comes to her, Sydney, not Theo, when Sydney comes to her aid in season 1 when she's with Stringer, he has this newfound respect for her, and she starts to have feelings for him, starts to forgive him. That's that moment. In season 2, when she brings Leo back, she kind of has this negative opinion of Colburn a little bit, doesn't she? When she's bringing him, am I remembering that correctly? When she brings him
Well,
back and she has this idea
she
of who he is.
doesn't she doesn't you know, she takes the girls back in the carriage, and they're very prickly is a word I would use, but she doesn't meet him yet then.
No, but
So I
I
don't
thought
think
she had like an idea of him not being watchful over them or something like that. I thought she'd said something like
I
that to the
don't
housekeeper, or it was the housekeeper who said it to her. We can't
right.
control Leo. That's why they need a governess or something along those lines.
Yeah, but it doesn't tell you a lot about Colburn, just that the girl seems to have run off all the governesses,
Mm-hmm.
right? The What I was saying is that I was kind of working my way through the beginning episodes as I was thinking about that and then contrasting it.
Mm-hmm.
But so I was thinking about when the parade is about to happen, and I think I'm right about that. Um, and Allison and Charlotte meet up with Lady Denham and Esther, and Allison asks Esther about the fact that she met her husband, you know, before in the season before and was successful about that, and asked for words of wisdom from Esther, and who says, "Disdain is every word, and if he persists, marry him." And I thought, and that's exactly what happened with Captain Fraser, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
She disdained his every word, and then he if he persists, marry him. I mean, that's exactly what happened in both situations
Yep.
with Allison and Fraser, in parallel with what happened with Esther and um, Babington.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's just fun that they had put those words in there, knowing very well what they were doing
Yeah, absolutely.
in the story.
And even that
Of
first
course,
meeting with Charlotte from season 1 to season 2 with Lady Denham, it was in season 1, it was, oh, you're hoping to find a husband. In season 2, even after seeing all that Charlotte had done, seeing all that she had grown through, how she left, Lady Denham said to her, oh, so you're still not married. So it's like,
right.
we kind of get that, we kind of pick off where we left off in the beginning of season 1, because I feel like at the end of season 1, Lady Denham and Charlotte were a little more understanding of each other. But in season 2, it's kind of like back to the start where it's, so you're still not married. So you're back again, are you? Sort of thing. But I felt like she sort of already knew about Sydney. I had an inkling
And
about Sydney and Charlotte. But it was nice to see that banter was immediately returned in the start of season 2.
I kind of don't agree with you about that, because I think Lady Denham was, remember they met up at Babington's wedding, and obviously Sydney was with Eliza, and she seems a little oblivious about that, and I think she had no, well, she did know that Charlotte was with the Parkers. I
Mm-hmm.
just don't know if she knows that was Charlotte was with Sydney. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't know if she knew that she was with him. I think she knew that there was something there. I think she knew that both of them liked each other or liked to be around each other. And I think that when she at the wedding, I kind of took that as her just kind of being devious when she
Huh.
called Sydney over.
Well, maybe she was that intentional. I have a tendency to think she was just kind of oblivious, you know. But there's times she comes out with really astute comments,
Mm-hmm.
especially like when she points out to Georgiana that she's doing the sugar boycott, and that's where, because of slavery, and that's where all of Georgiana's money came from.
Mm-hmm.
So she's astute in some ways and oblivious in others,
Yeah.
and insensitive in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's insensitive about the fact that Charlotte's heart is breaking, and yet she ends up bringing her to talk to Sydney, and then runs off when somebody else calls her. And she also is insensitive about, pretty much calling her a spinster, or, just pointing out at that time that we were just talking about how, well, you're still not married. Like that was all that could happen for a woman, was that they get married. So interesting. And yeah, I think she is sensitive and aware when it suits her purposes.
I feel like relationally, I think she understands more than she might let on. And I think the reason I'm pulling that from is how she watches all these couples, how she watches all these people. And when she's talking to Esther about her own experience in love and missed opportunity, I think that she can see that in other people. And I think that we kind of see that when there's certain people that she watches when they're together and other people she doesn't. And I think that's why I think that she can pick up on, okay, there might be something there, because A, she's experienced it, but B, she also knows that matches you have to make her idea is you can't be concerned with love. It has to be a monetary match. It has to be a beneficial match. So I think that she, in her own way, that's sort of her giving her wisdom by putting you in these awkward situations and forcing you to deal with something or not deal with it, is like, that's my wisdom I'm giving you because I'm smarter than everybody else with this. So I think that she's naive in that aspect.
Yeah, it'll be interesting since we know her former beau is coming back.
I cannot
in season
wait.
3. That will be so fun. I can just imagine the lines she's going to have. That will be amazing. And yet it may open we may get to see more of her heart because of that. So, and
more Lady Denham. Yes, please.
And how is Edward going to fit into all that?
Oh. Yeah. I still maintain I want him to see him get what he deserves. That's what I want. Yes. I care more about that now than I do about redemption. Just give him what he deserves for once, please.
Yeah, I'm sure he feels like he's already getting it because he's having to give in to her.
What, do you think he'll really give in to her, though?
I'm sure he'll make every effort not to.
Yeah, I think he'll pretend he is.
Yeah.
Until he can find another way.
It's hard for me to see him really changing after season 1. I had hope.
Yes.
After season 2, I really don't.
I'm 100% aligned with you there.
Yeah. So
there was another parallel I wanted to talk about before we get to, because it's in the beginning. So we see the other thing to compare the first dance to in season 2, episode 1, is the dance in season 1, episode 1, where we see Charlotte going into a ball and she's almost timid. She's being herself, but she's a little timid. She's a little cowed. She's a little overwhelmed, but she's interested and she wants to join in. And then you see her in her natural habitat in season 1 or season 2, and there's no hesitation. There's nothing holding her back. And the other parallel you can draw too is season 1, her hair is up. Season 2, her hair is down and flowing while she's at the dance. And that was something that the not costume designer, the hair and makeup person. Gosh, I could not remember the word for hair, Janice. This is a problem. The hair and makeup. I was reading an article. I don't know if she was saying it or if it was maybe it was in my interview with Paula Byrne, because we were talking about the hair up, hair down thing and what would be right. They intentionally would leave her hair down to show that she is a little more free, that she is a little more country, that she's not as bound by rules. But then you see her at the dance and it's up, and you see her at the dance in Willingdon and it's down. So I think that's a comparison that they're trying to draw your eye to as well.
Yeah, and obviously in Willingdon, this is where she grew up. This is her
country.
Yes, and right, and all of that stuff is a little more acceptable. Allison's hair is down as well. You know, we don't really see Allison's hair up until the first ball.
Yeah.
So prior to that, it's down. But obviously, that was part of dressing up, was putting your hair up. Anyway, so anything else you want to say about that?
No.
Okay. I found it really ironic. Here's that Colonel Lennox provided the balloon instead of the 20-hand horse that Arthur had secured after the elephant wasn't going to appear. They'd been outbid, as it were. And then it's Arthur. So Colonel Lennox comes to the rescue with the balloon, but then it's Arthur who rescues the balloon from getting loose. however, accidentally. I mean,
Yep.
he didn't exactly mean to, but then he did.
I love that
So
scene.
I know it's so funny. And it's, it's the irony. He rescues Colonel
Hmm.
Lennox and Charlotte and the balloon.
Hmm.
You
And the
know,
other thing there too is that Colonel Lennox is sort of touted as this war hero, right? He's the
right,
colonel. He's the guy who beats their opponents in war. He's the guy who runs over all these men. But then you actually look at Arthur, and at the end of season 1, he's saying, "Brother, I'll give you all my money. I will do this for you." We see him throughout season 2 saying, "Tom, I'm going to help you out of this mess. I'm going to help you out of this mess." And then we see at the end of season 2, he's with Tom, giving Tom the encouragement to go best Colonel Lennox. So Arthur
right.
is more the unsung hero than Lennox being the open touted hero.
Oh yeah, definitely. Arthur is, as we've talked before, and when they did little interviews with the
Mhm.
actors, what was the part they most would have liked to have played besides their own? And it was Arthur.
Yep.
You know,
Who wouldn't
and
want to play
his,
Arthur?
I know he's so fun, and he moves between all these different groups,
Hmm.
and yeah, he's so fun. Um,
Although no one but Turlo in my head can play Arthur that well.
oh, I agree. I mean, it's his part.
Yeah.
I did watch, he's in a film, a movie called
It's not Belfast, is it?
Belfast. Yes,
Okay.
Belfast. This film Belfast, it's about the struggle between the Protestants and the
Mm.
Catholics in
Ooh, I
Northern
would like to see
Ireland.
that.
It went on for a long time, and it's told from the viewpoint of this family. And the actress is the lead actress from Out Outlander. Yeah, yeah, she's really good, and he plays a minister in that film, and you only
Hmm.
see him in a couple of places, but he has a big effect on the young boy who's sort of the main character. I think it's based on Richard Braniff's real life story. He wrote and directed it. And do you know who Richard Braniff is? He played the kind of kooky professor in Harry Potter, the one that ended up.
I've never seen Harry Potter.
Oh no, oh no. He's done many films. You would have seen him in something because he's amazing. But regardless, that was really an aside. Okay, back to Sanditon. It suddenly hit me what I'd seen him in more recently. Um, then it's really ironic how Tom puts his trust in Colonel Lennox, who proves to be untrustworthy, while he doesn't show trust in Arthur, who turns out to be completely trustworthy.
In all
What a
areas.
contrast. Yeah.
He looked
Well,
at
except
Lennox
for
as his savior to Sanditon. He's going to bring all this money. He's going to do all this stuff. But it's Arthur
yeah.
and Arthur's support that ends up saving Tom in the end.
Oh, absolutely. His only stumble is with Lockhart
Hmm. Yeah.
and being sucked in, but everybody was pretty much sucked in except for maybe Mary.
Yeah.
She was very not sure about Lockhart, you know. Let's see. We were just talking about how uh Tom wanted to trust Colonel Lennox, but who wasn't trustworthy,
Hmm.
and or wasn't giving Arthur credit at the beginning. But fortunately, by the end, he recognizes how trustworthy Arthur is.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that Georgiana accuses all of her suitors of being fortune hunters, but it's Charles Lockhart that turns out to
Yep.
be the real fortune hunter.
And it's the only one
Yeah,
that she trusted.
right. She's the only one who let her guard down with. But you and I discussed this, and you were pointing out how he was a manipulator, a master
Hmm.
manipulator, and got her to trust him.
Hmm.
So
And they said
let's
when we first meet Charles Lockhart on the dressed super inappropriately coming up from the beach, and they say he's the new artist in town. We don't know how long he's been there, so we don't know how long he's been watching Georgiana turn these people away, seeing what she didn't respond to and what she did respond to. We don't know how long he's been watching her do that. So there's a very real chance that he picked up on, okay, all right, I've got to be completely opposite in every way to these guys, and I've got to really show that I'm different. So I mean, there's that that's what he did with Arthur too. It's that manipulation, because what he picked up on Arthur was he instantly started complimenting him. And that's what Arthur felt like Tom didn't hear anything he had to say, that he was not good enough for Tom. So it's,
well, he was as this is another interesting thing. This is when, remember when Georgiana and Arthur didn't go to the parade. They met in the tea room, and she took the sweets away, and he was talking with her about, well, she was talking about how she felt and felt like she was somewhat invisible, and he talked about how he was invisible.
Yep.
And that's what he was talking about, how he was invisible. So the two of them, it was pretty parallel, although in different ways.
Yep.
That they felt unseen, or not seen for who they truly were. And I think what happens by the end of so that's one thing that Lockhart did, is he made Georgiana feel like she was being seen, just like he did with Arthur.
Yeah.
And
Lockhart was sitting in that tea room, wasn't he? He was in the corner with the newspaper. He came in late.
Not at that time. It was when she was there with Allison and Charlotte.
Yeah. Okay.
When he was there, yeah. But anyway, so he obviously observed that Turlo and not Turlo, Arthur and I'm doing what you do. Arthur and Georgiana are close and friends. And so he goes to the person who's close to her, one of the close people. But it's interesting how they both really become seen during the course of season 2, because Arthur is seen, he rescues the balloon, he rescues Tom, really. He, speaks up to Tom about that he has to talk to Mary and tell her what's going on. And Georgiana, starts the sugar boycott. She, she is really seen throughout season 2. So they talk about how they feel, and then they become more responded to and seen during the course of the series. So,
and that's even that can be parallel to season 1, because we see Arthur. I mean, Arthur made everybody laugh in season 1. First time we see him, he's talking about wine and toast, and then we see him at the ball in episode 8, where he's spinning with Georgiana. He collapses on the couch, and so he's kind of seen as something that he's not. He's more seen as this ridiculous kind of hypochondriac, when we find out he's not the hypochondriac. So that's our image of him. But I think it's something he puts on because he's not given a lot of faith in himself. And Georgiana too. And we talked about this before, that we really hope that Georgiana's matured, because she's not really likable in season 1. But it's also not really who she is. She's in a place where she's upset and she's hurting and she doesn't want to be where she's at, but that doesn't mean that's who she is. And then we see her both talk about being unseen in season 2. And then we see who they actually are in season 2.
Yeah. And who they become and how they are seen differently in everybody's eyes when they kind of both stand out and they stand up for themselves. Now we had a hint of that from Arthur in season 1 when he says to Sydney, I don't think I could trust Eliza again. I admire your ability to forgive, but I don't think I could trust her again. And of course, I think that Sydney responded to that, but how is it that Charlotte puts it? Circumstances conspired against them. Conspired. Thank you. Conspired against them. So interesting about Arthur and how he's seen and how Georgiana's seen. And then the next thing I have on my notes, and I'm going to run out of notes pretty soon, and we'll just be working from memory. Colonel Lennox testifies to how well Edward has performed. And we find out just how unreliable he truly is. He goes and tells Lady Denham that he is doing a great job. He's towing the line. That's not the words he used, but he's, being reliable.
Yep.
And not only do we find out just how unreliable he is, but so does Colonel Lennox.
Yep.
When he, yeah, such an awful character. I mean, I admire Jack for being willing to play that despicable a character.
And the
I have
turn
heard-
it took was so intense of a turn
Yeah.
because we all wanted, like, we were like, yes, he's gonna be redeemed. He's got so much potential, and then he just didn't.
And it's so in contrast to who the actor is.
Oh yeah.
But I have heard actors say before how kind of fun it is for them to play the evil character, because it's so different from themselves. And they can really get into it and let out emotions that they would, and say things they would never in real life say. So yeah, so that's interesting. I mean, one of my favorite parts of that, talking about Edward getting his due, is when Colonel Lennox pulls those things off his shoulders. I mean, like, it's the biggest way I could disgrace you ever. I don't know exactly what those things are called, but it's like removing your stripes if you were, in modern language.
Absolutely.
So, and it's that interaction between Lennox and Edward is, of course, quite interesting, and how it's Edward that gets them to come to Sanditon. And so ironic that he wants to take advantage of the situation with Clara, and then in the end she is unwilling to take advantage of that.
Yes.
She calls a stop to it. It's ironic that he put all this trust in her to be as evil as he was, and she showed that she couldn't do that.
Yep.
That in the end, I mean, she went along with it for a while when she thought it was the best thing for her son. But in the end, she wasn't the despicable character that he is.
Yes. And the other thing there too is that Edward thought coming to Sanditon would be his salvation. He could get everything he wanted, everything he deserved, everything that belonged to him, sort of thing. And it was coming to Sanditon that completely destroyed him.
In the end, yeah. Yeah.
Which, I mean, we're all,
but only because Clara stood up to him. Who knows what would have happened if she hadn't been there, hadn't been pregnant,
absolutely,
hadn't had the truth come out. And it's wonderful and ironic that he went about all this deviousness that was really aimed at Esther, and yet Esther triumphed in the end.
Yeah.
She got away from him, and she ended up with the child she so longed to have. And he doesn't get recognized as the heir, so that he would get the fortune that really she probably will get in the end.
And what a great turn. I mean, we all wanted to see that. We all wanted to see him not get anything, but it's watching Clara be the savior. It was, and that's the other thing that someone had said on our page, I don't get what your obsession is with her. And this is it. Clara got to be the savior.
Yeah. She's the one that really, when push came to shove, she showed up with the truth. She spoke the truth and stopped the evil that had been going on.
Yeah. And who that's a parent can let me reword that differently. That's not what I meant to say. Let me word that differently. Who as a parent can't understand the need to protect your child at all costs? So it's not like Clara allowing this to happen. It's not like, oh, she's just up for herself. No, she was actually doing that for George.
Right.
You could tell she wasn't comfortable with it, but she was trying to protect her son. And she felt that. I think that the other irony there too is that Edward came kind of expecting Clara to be this all evil thing, but it was Clara's fear and how evil Edward was that made her initially succumb to his plan, and then in the end avert his plan because she saw how evil he was.
Right. And it's interesting because in the first season, they both wanted to use each other, you know, and we thought she was, pretty underhanded, although a victim of circumstances of her upbringing and all that. And she knew from the beginning who he was. And then, as you said, she just tried to go along with it for the benefit of her son. And I'm sure she was wanting to be in a place where she could survive, but in the end, she does what's best for everybody, what's best for Esther, what's best for the baby, what should happen to Edward, that he should get his, as you say, just rewards. At least he should be told out. The truth should come out, is what I'm trying to say. And it did when she spoke up at the wedding breakfast. But then the wedding never happened. So she ended up, I'm glad I think a lot of it was because of her feelings towards Esther and how she'd come to really appreciate her. But also, I think a lot of it was she had to be thinking, do I really want to be tied to this man for the rest of my life?
Yeah. Do I want my son to be tied to this man for the rest of his life?
Right. And knowing what Edward's true character is, he is truly the villain in the series so far. Much more than anyone else.
There's the other aspect where, in season 1, we see Lady Denham sort of being hoodwinked by Clara and Edward and then banishing them. And then she's hoodwinked by them again, still a little not trusting, but welcoming them back in. And she even said that she was fooled twice by them. By the same two in the same way. The only difference is that one was redeemed, and like Clara came back to be redeemed. Edward came back to be so much worse than he originally was.
Oh yeah.
So you see that parallel too, that being ousted in that way, it changed Clara for the better, but it changed Edward for the worse.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. Yeah, it was interesting how that happened. Anything else you want to say about the Denhams while we're on the Denhams?
I don't think so.
Okay. And well, other than I'll say this, it was awesome how, in spite of all that she had been through, all she was concerned about, that Esther spoke up on Clara's behalf as well. To give Clara credit for being a victim of Edward's as well, and not let her take the blame for what was really Edward's doing.
And the line there that we can relate it back to in season 1 was when Babington finds her in episode 8, and he looks at her 7, and he looks at Esther and he says, I will not allow you to be a victim of his anymore.
Right.
And she had that relationship with Edward that was romantic, and Babington said that. So then in season 2, in that final episode with the Denhams, she says Clara is his victim because she was there before, and it took Babington, it took someone loving her enough, caring for her enough to say, you are his victim. You are not the abuser here. You are the victim, and you don't need to be. And Esther did the same thing that Babington did for her. She did it for Clara.
Yeah, that's right. And because, it's good. And then she sort of forgave her for what she knew was really Edward's doing.
Because she was in Edward's position, or she was in Clara's position before. And it was Esther trying to destroy Clara.
Yeah, definitely.
So she knew, and that was all at Edward's prodding. She knew exactly who was responsible for all this thing and the sway that he could have over someone who was desperate for a fix.
Right.
And the other thing too about the Denhams, about Lady Denham specifically, is season 1, we got the pineapple luncheon, right? Where it's excess.
Right.
There's this overflowing excess of food, only to be humiliated by the very, very molded, rotten pineapple. Season 2, we get this excessive garden party with cakes and towers of macaroons and all these sweets for her to be humiliated by people turning in their cake plate and saying, no, I'm not going to eat this. So we got both of those. It's both of these seasons, we got Lady Denham humbled by the people
Right.
who she thinks she lords over.
Yeah. Interesting, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we should continue this next week.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Yeah. So I think here's what we're going to do, because I mean, I don't know if you can tell, but we didn't get through everybody. We didn't get
By
through all
any
the stuff.
stretch of the imagination.
No. And there are 2 seasons we have to compare, and we have 2 seasons where there's the way they connected things, the way they had to. And the other thing too, I think the reason that there is so many parallels provided and so many ironies provided is because this season didn't go the way they had originally intended when they started planning for a season 2. This is not the direction they thought it was going to go. So they had to find a way, and they knew that Sanditon fandom wanted a Sidlot. They knew that, but they also knew it was out of their hands. They couldn't give it. So they needed to sort of make us happy and also continue a story, also get us connected to these characters. So that's why there are so many parallels, I think, in season 2 to season 1. But there's also the ironies of, yeah, we couldn't give you that, but we're going to give you this other story that's going to be better in its fullness. It's going to be better in its completion. So we had those ironies sprinkled out. So there's a lot to compare between these 2 seasons, and even within each season on its own. So next week, I know that we had said that next week we were going to talk about the comparisons to Jane Austen's novels, but next week we're going to do a part 2 of parallels and ironies between these 2. And then the week after, if we can get through all of that, we will talk about comparisons between this to Jane Austen's stories. And what I want you guys to do, our listeners, start sending us your fan fiction that you want us to read, because that's going to be coming up, not in the next 2 to 3 weeks, but soon. We're going to start reading that. And it'd be nice for Janice and I to have more than a 2-day notice to read a story. And
yes,
it
would be nice.
So we are looking for, and it completed or not, send us your link if you want to. At the end of our podcast, I don't know if you guys listen all the way through, but at the end is where we give our social medias and our emails. We've got an outro for that. So listen to that, get our contact information, and reach out to us and let us know your fan fiction, what you wrote, when you wrote it.
And it's with the YouTube recordings underneath.
So that's right. Yep.
It's printed. That's probably easier way to find it.
Mm-hmm. And it's also on our podcast platforms. When we put it out, it's also in there too. We have all of our socials, all of our contact information right there printed out for you. So get into that. If you want to come on here and talk to us about some of this stuff, because we have minimum, we have no guarantee of when season 3 is coming out. We don't have any information on when it's coming out, but sometime, I would imagine it's going to come out around March of 2023 is my guess, off of no insider information whatsoever, just a hunch. So I could be very wrong.
Based on last year. That's why we think that.
We know season 1 came out in the US in the end of January. Season 2 came out in March. So I'm guessing it's going to come around March at the same time, a year apart. So, we're almost out of material focused on this. Hopefully we'll have some interviews for you, but we want to discuss with you. A lot of you are starting to engage with us on our YouTube page, and that's great. And we love it. You want to come on here and talk with Janice and I? Let us know. We'd love to have you on. Susan, we got to work out with you too on how to get you on here, because we would love to talk with you in person. So that's all for this week. Next week, stay tuned for part 2 of Ironies and Parallels in Sanditon season 1 and season 2. And we'll see you soon. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Are you craving more TSC content? Head on over to our social media accounts. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and our Facebook group, the Sanditon Chronicles Sanditon Family Fan Club. Also, check out our website, thesanditonchronicles.com. Of course, we want to hear from you. We want to know what you want to hear and what your thoughts are. Email us at the.sanditonchronicles@gmail.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tune in every week for new episodes.